Hotel workers of Reddit, what is the worst thing you have found in a room after a guest stay? Story 1 worked at an upscale ski resort. One family let their toilet training kid pee behind the toilet and under the sink throughout their whole visit, then put our white towels on top of it to help clean up the mess. Whole place smelled like a freakin' rhino enclosure, ruined the towels. Story 2 a syringe under a mattress. After I felt on the end of my finger, I was tucking in a sheet under the bed, and there were actually 2 uncovered insulin needles under there. I got rushed to hospital hepatitis shots and a tetanus shot, 2 different HIV prevention medication for a month, monthly blood tests for about a year. I'm fine, and it barely stuck me in truth, but I was already afraid of needles and disease. I still feel traumatized. I was not going to post it all, but I've always wondered if there was anything else I should have done. The doctors assured me that they were more precautious than necessary. Story 3 a dead body. Someone ended up killing themselves in the hotel room by hanging themselves in the closet. Was in there a few days before we found him. Story 4 worst to clean up, not because it was gross, but because it was annoying and time-consuming, was popcorn. A baseball team stayed in a couple rooms, and I guess they had those like caramel popcorn that they had just thrown all over the room, at the walls, furniture. It stuck to the carpet and was almost impossible to vacuum. Story 5 someone pooped in the nightstand. It had been there long enough to dry out, so it took nearly an hour to scrub it clean. Another room had menstrual pads stuck all over the walls at random. Story 6 old couple checked out and left a huge box of toys. Not that bad, right? We keep items for 90 days. Hotel gets first dibs after that. Say it's an iPad that would be good for something, then whoever found it gets second dibs. Then GM. Then it's whoever wants it. Head housekeeper kept them locked in her desk. BC she wanted first dibs and was scared someone else would take them. Story 7 woman with mysophobia, fear of germs, stayed with us. She never let the cleaning ladies into the room as she preferred to clean it herself. One day she leaves to go out and removes the do disturb sign. Maid calls down and says the room has a strong chemical odor and found bags of pee and in the drawers. Story 8 a bachelorette party came through, and after they left the next night we had a new rule that charges a 400 glitter fee. But I mean, you couldn't see the floor, so much glitter. It's been a few years and you can probably still find glitter in the carpet throughout the hotel. Story 9 2 worst experiences I had to witness where a couple came to the desk early in the AM. They clearly had been in an all-out fist fight. They were a cash-paying customer, and all they said was, "Sorry, we got in a fight. There is blood in the room. We are HIV positive." Then they took off. Room was an absolute horror show. Had to hire special cleaners to come gut the room and ended up replacing basically everything in the room. Room was OC for almost a year. Same hotel. We had some wards of the state type staying. Worst were a couple with a newborn. They couldn't afford basically anything, so made the decision to use our towels as diapers. The state wouldn't let us kick them out and they were just taking the towels off the carts. Ended up having to evict them from the hotel as they had been there long enough to establish residency. Story 10 a blood-soaked Dora the Explorer doll. There were no kids in the room as far as we know. It was just one dude in his mid-30s. There were 2 cans of Monster Energy drink beside it and $180 left in tips under the pillow. No idea what was going on. Edit yes, the cops were called. It was really weird, because at first they seemed pretty satisfied that nothing crazy went down, but then all the cops assigned to the case started to go missing one by one. Then, on the anniversary of their disappearances, a blood-soaked doll was delivered to the police station, 8 dolls in total. And the creepiest thing about it was that 3 of the cops had children. Those children's names were stitched into 3 of the dolls. Okay, that part about the missing cops was made up. But really, though I didn't really deal with the cops directly, I gave my statement about how we found the room. They sent me home and that was the only time I talked to them. It was a summer job, so I went back to school about a month and a half later. But when I left, our understanding was that everything was okay. If anything came to light after I left, I was not made aware of it, but I feel like since I never had to talk to the cops again, they were satisfied that nothing super crazy went down. Also, geez, you guys sure are confident that doll was in an... Story 11 it was a hallway. I worked the front desk. A Little League baseball team was staying the night and a guest complained to my manager about bats flying around. My manager assumed the baseball team was just being rowdy and headed up to tell them to calm down. Turns out it wasn't baseball bats. Just a normal OL flying bat hanging out in the hallway. Story 12 a friend used to clean hotel rooms as a side job. Once he found on the nightstand with a slice of cheese on top. Another time, he went into a room to clean and this woman was lying on the bed naked. He apologized and started to leave. She offered him 50 euros to spit on her while she masturbated. He spat on her. Edit they found out who it was and charged him extra for cleaning, etc. Also banned him from the chain. Apparently, this wasn't the only hotel he would furnish with his nightstand-based sliced dairy fecal top deposits. Edit thanks for the silver you person you. Edit again another silver. Cheers all. Story 13 I worked at a hotel a few years ago, front desk. I checked out a nice couple in the morning. They were very friendly. Said they enjoyed their stay. Then housekeeping got to their room. The poor woman looked shell-shocked. I got to go through the room with a camera and my supervisor to document the state of the room. 2 large, black, double-headed dildos. Lots of Ziploc baggies with powdery residue. Syringes, some used, some still with caps on them, including 2 in the toilet, and more travel-sized bottles of baby oil than I could count. We also found what appeared to be feces and blood smeared all over the bedding and walls and a small digital camera. Police were called, descriptions of them taken, and all their information they had used to check in. I quit soon after, so I don't know if they ever found them or pressed charges. Story 14. Pizza, and not just like leftovers, an entire pizza, and not a single slice of it in the box. The first red flag we found was the slice of pizza smeared all over on the TV. Then we saw 2 slices side by side like they had worn them for slippers and dragged their feet across the floor. 1 slice in the dresser, 1 in the nightstand, 1 in the sheets, and 1 in the bathroom sink. We cleaned the room as normal and put all the pizza in the box. The whole time I'm wondering why someone would do this. Was the pizza not good? Was 1 slice enough and you had to buy the whole thing? I'm doing the final checks in the room and it still smells like pizza. I flick the lamp on and look for the final slice. I finally find it, shadowed in the lampshade. This individual had smeared the last slice on the inside of the lampshade. That was the final piece of the puzzle or pizzle. This person bought an entire pizza just to hide it in his hotel room. Story 15. I was in housekeeping for a while in the winter, and a coworker of mine found it in a condom tied to the microwave door. Definitely the most baffling thing I'd heard of anyone finding. Story 16. People that have died, feces on the walls and furniture along with vomit, drug paraphernalia, drugs, and once a gun. Feces and vomit is the worst though. Story 17. A little late, but I have 2, found parrot feathers all over a room. They claimed it was service animal, it wasn't, and had gotten too stressed and pulled all of its plumage out. The guests tried to blame the hotel for noise. We charged them for the cleanup. Was balancing month end one day when the front was swarmed with police cars. They raided a room with no notice to us at the front desk. Turned out a pimp was cooking meth in one of rooms with 2 prostitutes and a dog. There was a short standoff before everyone was arrested. Their car was seemingly forgotten about in the parking lot, but it disappeared a week later. We were unable to charge for damages since all of their cards were stolen. Story 18. Not me but my dad. He was the director of housekeeping for a worldwide hotel chain. His housekeepers didn't know what to do with a girthy 12-inch suction cupped on the writing table. It was still very moist, he said. Then he looked up who stayed in the room to see if maybe they wanted it back, but it was too tiny, frail little old ladies, canes all, and he said it was too embarrassing to contact them, so he waited a bit to see if they'd call asking for it, but they never did. He ended up throwing it out. Edit. Someone gilded my dad's girthy wet story. Thank you, you sick freak. Let's be friends. Story 19. Not a hotel worker but one stayed in a resort in the Dominican where someone had in the safe, or I guess carried there to the safe. Not sure, either way, I guess the staff hadn't checked to see if anything was in there when cleaning after the last people. Edit. Just got a message from someone who was wondering when it was, because the same thing happened in their hotel in 2012. Quite alarming that this apparently isn't uncommon. Story 20. 25 years ago I worked at a snooty part of a snooty ski resort in Park City, Utah. Most of the regular guests were just typical old rich white dudes. But during Sundance season though, the celebrities come out. There is a certain musician, entertaining us for decades now, who has a disgusting hobby, or did in the early 90s at least. Next time you're cutting footloose, or getting close to the danger zone, just know that Kenny Loggins gives his entire family coffee ground enemas, which leaves a giant mess, and leaves it for the hotel staff to clean up, twice in one stay. Story 21. My ex-wife projectile vomited all over a room at the La Quinta in Somerville after way too many Socos at the Rattlesnake. I cannot drive 93 northbound out of Boston without some degree of shame, sorry, La Quinta workers. I did the best I could, but there was only so much that could be done. Also, this is one of the many reasons she is now my ex-wife. Edit. 2 good things that came from my ex, my kids, and my most upvoted comment. Story 22. A bear. First, you gotta understand that a lot needs to happen for this to occur. Our lowest floor was still about 1.5 meters from the ground, and each outside room had a balcony rail. However, a guest had decided to want to unload his motorcycle from his truck and leave the ramp down, so I'm assuming he could ride the bike up when he was done. The guest that was staying in the room had room service, decided to leave the food uncovered and the balcony doors open, and later went to the hotel pool spot to relax. Upon returning, they had gone to us at reception and said that there was a bear in the room. Puzzled, we quietly approached the room and slowly opened the door. Lo and behold, there was a bear eating room service and making a mess of my afternoon. We called Parks Canada to deal with it. Guest was not charged a cleaning fee. TLDR, a bear used a car as a ramp to get into a room at the property. Story 23. It was a family retreat kid's birthday party. The adults were getting shit-faced while the kids were in the presidential suite raising. They had decided to have a fully stocked ice cream bar and allowed the kids to do what they wanted with it. M&Ms crushed into the carpet, chocolate footprints on the walls, whipped cream everywhere. Fruit punch spilled on the bed. In total we had to charge them about $7,000 in damages, which they took to court, because they thought the cleanup would be included. That's why we did it at a hotel. They also smashed glass all over our dog hiking trail, which I had to clean up. Story 24. I do hotel renovations, so we find anything the housekeepers have forgotten over the years. Most often we find dirty magazines, clothing, children's toys, sometimes drugs in super random places. Story 25. One of my favorite hotel stories. Not a room, but the pool. It's late evening, and a woman comes angrily into our lobby from the pool with 3 children and says, "You guys need to do something about what's going on out there," and gestures to the pool area. I look at her inquisitively and she just says, "Go look, you'll see." I walk outside and it's pretty immediately clear the couple in the hot tub are discreetly having I approach just enough to get their attention and say, "Hi guys, I know everyone's here to have a good time tonight, but we got a complaint about some hot and heavy activity in the hot tub. They're clearly intoxicated, but apologize and say it will stop." A few minutes later, the phone rings. It's the woman who complained before calling from her room which faces the pool. "They're still at it. You need to do something. Children are staying in this hotel." I go back outside and sure enough, now that the spectators are gone, they're out in the hot tub. I go back out, tell them to get out. They start giving me the story. It's their anniversary. They're very sorry. We won't have any more problems with them, etc., etc. I foolishly let them stay in the hot tub. 10 minutes later, phone rings. Seriously, same lady. I look out the window. They're both totally naked. "I'm sorry, ma'am. I've warned them. I'm calling the police." Police arrive and head out to the pool. The officer handles it like a pro. He's very nice. Lets them know that it's inappropriate, but he doesn't want to ruin what's clearly a fun weekend for them both. But they need to go to their room and not come out for the rest of the night. They are to stay in their room until tomorrow morning. No excuses. The couple thanks him for his understanding and promises they'll behave and stay in their room. The officer and I wind up chatting and laughing about it all, and he asks if he can grab a cup of coffee in our lobby while he fills out his report. Of course he can. He's sitting in the lobby, I'm back to work, and I hear him say, "Oh, you've got to be kidding me." I'm shocked at the broken quietness as I see him jump up and exit the lobby, right to the hot tub, where the same couple is back in the hot tub making out. I can only assume they took the stairs at the end of the hall out to the parking lot and around to the pool, arrested them both. They came back Monday afternoon. They were arrested on Friday night to collect their property. Story 26. There was an older woman who checked in my second week of being there. She definitely should not have been independent. She lived in town and booked a room for a week. She said that she was getting her house renovated because it was infested with fiberglass. She was probably in her 70s or was just not upkeeping herself for a person in her 60s. She would walk around with one of those surgical masks and wearing yellow rubber gloves. As the week went on, she started to wear bandages on her arms. We think she was scratching herself. I bet if we asked it would have been because of the fiberglass. She shouldn't have been able to drive, but she kept going to and from her house to get more things. Basically was moving in. Our hotel was on a main road and she would just back up into it without looking. It was a miracle she never got into an accident. But other than that, she would spend most of her time in the room, and occasionally would walk to the office where the manager would sit. This would be me or one of my other coworkers, and just spout crazy stories about fiberglass and how it was everywhere and all over her room. Once the week was up, she extended her stay another 5 days because her house wasn't ready yet. She repeatedly declined maid service, so we could never really get a glance of the condition of the room, yet she would keep complaining that her air conditioning had fiberglass all over it. And one of the days she came to the door complaining that the room was infested with spiders, and she showed a tissue that she said had spiders in it, but there was nothing. Like real sad stuff. Unfortunately, since we didn't really have any real way of helping her, my boss advised me to tell her that we are booked solid for the rest of the summer, so she couldn't extend her stay any longer. So we waited out those last few days dealing with her complaining and occasionally catching glances at the room as the maids brought her towels and such. From what we saw, there were pillows everywhere, a big bag of like perfumes, pills, etc. sprawled out on the dresser like so many random things, etc. She was seen a few times carrying large garbage bags into the room. We weren't sure what was in them. Just imagine a room that a mentally ill person had been staying in. She also had a few weird interactions with guests that made them complain, so we really could not wait until she was gone. But this is the freakiest part where we get to the answer to what we found after a guest stay. ID was spotless. On her last night, we think she climbed out the window first floor and put stuff in her car and left, stealing the key too, but that's common enough, we just replaced them. We went back and looked on camera and she was not on camera at all. The night manager did not see her leave. If you leave the regular way, you have to be seen by the manager. The office is in the front and it's a small hotel. Only way she could have done it was through the window. Every worker at the hotel was so curious to see what the room was like after she was gone. It was insane clean, nothing broken except the air conditioner air filter. She said it had fiberglass all in it. But other than that, not much else. We still had a third party clean the room, but it was freaking weird, man. My boss said she drove by the address and it was a beautiful house, must be a couple mil minimum. And there was like a metal trailer in the driveway. We think she started living in that after the hotel. Sad, and just so bizarre. I really hope she got some help or something. There really wasn't much way specifically could do, so we had to just move on. TLDR, mentally ill woman stayed because her house had fiberglass all over. She was increasingly weird and started to freak out other guests as time went on and then left like a ninja. Room pretty much good as new. Real sad situation though. Story 27. Not a worker, but once my family checked into our hotel and go to our room and open it up only to find a very mortified naked man sitting on the couch watching TV. Made eye contact and just backed out of there. He has the same exact name as me, so that's where the mess up came about. Story 28. I worked security for a while at a really large hotel. Two stand out in my mind. The first, a guest that went out by ambulance because of some allergic reaction, what the guest claimed at least. The room was full of black and diarrhea. The smell was horrible. I have never smelled like that and hope to never again gag. The second wasn't something left but an assistance call. Elderly man was unresponsive when we got there. We used a defibrillator on him till the ambulance arrived and he actually survived. He came back to the hotel some months later to thank us. It was great. Most of those calls didn't end well, so having one who survived and came back to say hey was nice. Story 29. Empty boxes of fried chicken and the bones laying all over the floor between beds. White powder on the dresser and a lamp thrown through the glass door dividing 2 rooms of a suite once. Dirty diapers and birthday cake smashed into the walls. People get really shitty when you have to kick them out for trying to have a party. I think the only one that tops that was a guest's corpse. Full disclosure, I wasn't the one who found that. The guy downed a fifth of wild turkey and a bottle of pills. Never found out why. For those with dark humor though, we googled him afterwards and found out he owned a funeral home. My manager asked me why he would bother to do it in the hotel considering that I was the one who found out about that, and my first response was, you never mix your business with pleasure. Story 30. I was road tripping alone, and decided to support the local economy of this small town I was stopping in and stay in a small family-owned motel instead of a chain. It was obviously infested with bedbugs, obvious. The next morning, that is, I arrived late at night and went straight to bed. The worst thing was that I was moving myself out to college and had all my worldly possessions in the car with me, all of my clothing, all of my bedding, the few pieces of furniture I was bringing. Fortunately, isolating everything that had been in that room in trash bags, and buying bedbug spray immediately prevented it from infesting everything I owned, but all the time I spent anticipating the worst got me hugely stressed out. Story 31. I've posted this before, but hey, race my story. I used to work at a hotel as a housekeeper. The rule was when you finished all of your rooms you had to go help the other housekeepers because they like to go slow to get more hours and we just can't allow that. Anyways, so I wander up to the second floor down at the far end, room 226, a double queen. The room hadn't been stripped yet, the bedding and trash is still in there, and I thought that was odd because normally we have all of the rooms stripped by noon and it was 3 p.m. Well, I open the door and this overwhelming stench of just slams into my face. Not even like normal smell either, like someone had been devouring hot sauce covered shrimp at an all-you-can-eat buffet for 3 days. I pull my shirt collar up over my nose. It can't be that bad, they probably just didn't flush, right? I press on into the bathroom, eyes beginning to water, my throat having dry involuntary seizures. I force my poor eyes open, nothing, the bathroom is spotless. Oh God, where is it? The panic sets in, I must go further into the darkness. I must cross the hotel room and open the window. As light illuminates the room, I can finally see what the demon has done. Do you remember the scene from Dogma, where the demon comes out of the toilet? I think he left there and checked right on into my hotel. Was smeared all over the white duvets and sheets on both beds. This dude had literally himself smeared it in the bed, switched beds, and in that one too. He left a trail of sickly brown matter across the carpet, decorated with tiny surprise nuggets just for me. I noped. I told front desk that I absolutely refused to clean that room, and if they wanted to write me up, fire me, I would be fine with that. You might have fun with her tales from the front desk. Story 32. A dead body. Guy came in for the weekend, hired a prostitute, and odd on heroin. The worst part was probably when his sister came to get all his belongings. When we pulled his car out of valet, we noticed 2 baby seats in the back. Story 33. We got a call from an anonymous person asking for us to do a wellness check on a guest. I get a call from security a few minutes later, and the guy on the other end of the radio sounded pretty shook up. Ahmad, we need you up here ASAP. I get upstairs and the 2 security guards look pale. They refused to go into the room, only saying that they knew I would know how to handle the situation. I'm a combat vet and ex-police officer. I get into the room and everything is tidy, bags packed, beds made, etc. At that moment I see the balcony door open and what appears to be someone laying out on the balcony wearing all their clothes. Drunk, passed out, no. As I got to the balcony, I could now see the person's lap, and a revolver in their hand on said lap. I stop for a moment, and realize he's not moving, so I step out onto the balcony, and the gravity of the situation becomes clear. Guy blew his head off, 1 shot to the roof of his mouth. I'll spare you the details, but I didn't have to check much to call it. At least this was the middle of the night, 1 shot, no other guests were awakened, and I was able to get PD, coroners and detectives in, and all of them including the body out through the back with no one else knowing anything happened. I went back downstairs and finished my pizza. Story 34. My girlfriend worked front desk at a hotel that was connected to a hospital, so they frequently had visiting outpatients staying there. One day a lady came down and was clearly disoriented. She ripped out her tracheotomy in the lobby. They rushed her over to the hospital, got her fixed up, sent her back to her room. And then she came downstairs and did it again, one of the worst shifts she ever had. Story 35. 3 guys in one room left all of their windows open and lights on overnight in the summer. I have never seen so many different types of bug flying around the room. It was terrifying. We ran in spraying bug killer like our lives depended on it, then ran out and left the room for an hour. We came back to a floor that was almost black with dead bugs. I can still hear the crunching. Story 36. I once cleaned a stayover during an anime convention, found a bunch of anime girl plush dolls and a tail in a half-made bed, and what I fondly referred to as a family-size bottle of lube with a lotion pump just chillin' on the nightstand. I'm into anime, so it wasn't a surprise for me, but I could only imagine literally any one of my older coworkers finding that. Not a cleaner, but a hotel user. My family and I once walked into a hotel room only to find it in complete disrepair. Toilet was beginning to overflow, fridge was not plugged in and had some sort of fruit or something in it. Bed was unmade and smelly, it didn't even have a closet. Worst thing to come to after a 5-hour drive with the family. Pool was immaculate. I slept there instead. It was a good day. Story 37 had a younger couple leave bodily fluids all over the bed and wall from there, and everywhere. If I had a black light it would have lit up like a rave. I've worked night audit at a couple hotels for a few years now, and I've got a couple of stories of nastiness left behind in rooms. The first story happened about a week after I started working night audit. This guy who was staying on our first floor had decided to go outside to smoke in only a towel. His towel apparently became stuck in the door, and in a genius move, he grabbed the smoker's pole and busted out the window to his room. When he climbed in, he cut himself badly enough that he bled all over the room. The shower curtain, bedding and a couple of pillowcases had to be sent out to be professionally cleaned, and the rest of the room had to be professionally cleaned. The hotel charged him with the cost of the window, the cost of the cleanings, and for every night the room was out of order, which was about a month. During cleanup, one of our housemen got cut by the glass in the window, and had to get treated in case of bloodborne disease, and get stitches. The guest paid for all that too. The cost was around $10K for everything, and he was banned from the property forever. He tried to come in again about a year later with a third-party reservation, and our GM personally waited for him and escorted him off the property. The second story is about a man who we called Huge James. Huge James is literally the fattest man I have ever seen. He's pretty tall, and easily at 400 to 500 pounds. In his room are his wife, his daughters, and himself. The women in the family were all normal size. This family quickly developed a bad reputation with our pizza chains that delivered, because they would order a lot of pizza and never tip the driver. The drivers would come down and complain to me or other front desk staff about this. It got to the point where the Domino's drivers would just give us the pizzas to take up to their room. Huge James and his family never let housekeeping in for about a week, and when they finally were allowed in, there was so much trash from fast food and pizza that they had begun to stuff it under the beds. What is worse is that Huge James was physically too big to use the toilet in the room. We have rooms with reinforced toilets, so we absolutely could have accommodated him, so he had defecated in the tub. He then would use our nice white hotel towels to wipe himself, and just leave it on the floor. Nobody knew about the towels until our laundry lead, Miss Brenda, the sweetest and nicest little woman I know, found them herself. We had to throw the towels away, and we nearly lost Miss Brenda that day as well. While that was going on in the laundry room, one of our housekeepers was cleaning the room and noticed a towel tucked into the side of one of the beds. She pulled the towel out and a giant came flying out with the towel. I saw the pictures of it, and end to end, it was almost as wide as the towel it was covered with. In addition to this, there were stains all over the mattress that had soaked through the sheets and onto the mattress. In the bathroom, the tub wasn't draining, and when they pulled the stopper mechanism out to try and clear the blockage, a lot of came with it, and that's how we knew they were shoving it down the shower drain. During this time, they had been staying on a third-party reservation and making a new reservation every few days. When the new reservation popped up in our system after discovering what they had done to the room, the GM decided to evict them. Huge James came down and started screaming at the front desk supervisor about how the mess wasn't his fault and that it was retarded daughter doing all that, and making the messes and defecating in the tub. Those were his exact words, and how he talked about his daughter, if that helps you understand what kind of a person he really was. Everyone had met his wife and daughters, and they were really nice people, so we didn't believe him when he made claims that his daughter was the one making the messes. Huge James drove a lifted Hummer with huge chromed R rims, and the night before his eviction, I jotted down his license plate number in case he tried to pull something before he left. He did. When he found out that he was no longer allowed on the property, he trashed his room and smeared all the sauce packets from fast food and actual food on the walls, the TV, and the windows. They found food between the mattresses, and the bed frames had been broken. When it was time for him to go, we had police there to them off the property. After they left, all the damage was found in the room, and because I had the license plate number, they were found and charged with vandalism, I think, and we took them to court for the damage to room. It came out in court that it was actually him that was defecating in the tub, and he destroyed the room before they left. Story 38. Friend used to be a general manager. There was a guest who had stayed there for a few days but kept the do not disturb sign up, not letting anyone in. Well, after 3 days they had to go in to clean the room and do a welfare check, and they found this chick tied up to the bed with a camera on her. Some guy had kept her tied up for 3 days straight and was live streaming it somewhere. Story 39. My hotel found heroin and used needles scattered in the bed sheets. They got lucky they didn't get stabbed. We had to close the room, call in a deep cleaning crew contractor, who spent the greater part of 4 hours completely breaking the room down in search for more. It cost something like $12K, I think, overall. Story 40. My mom used to do housekeeping for hotels, and she has seen so many disgusting things. People have pissed and all over the rooms, smeared on the walls, vomited everywhere, and left used condoms everywhere. People can be incredibly disgusting. Story 41. This is one of those threads where you want to grab that popcorn, but considering what kind of fluids is involved in some of these stories, I think it will stay in the pantry. Story 42. Own a few hotels, and when I walked in to see things that needed to be repaired I almost threw up, and am an EMT for 15 years now. There was a giant turd smeared into the letter Sanchez really crappily. The beds had been pissed all over, both of them, and there was blood on the counter. It was drops of blood, so someone was standing over it bleeding. There were at least 4 to 5 condoms used, and with some baby juice still inside. This room has been off limits for 3 years now. Story 43. This is more weird than bad, but I forgot that a guest decided to extend his stay, and so when a maid went to clean his room she called me up saying she wasn't able to get into the room. I went up and unlocked it for her. Upon opening the door we peered into the room and she immediately yelled and hollered about how she wasn't going to step inside that room and quickly just left the scene. The guest, a sweet and somewhat nerdy 20-something computer programmer, had what I can only describe as an immense amount of voodoo items in this room, including this strange statue of a raven, a large tome, candles, and other fetishist items. Felt bad for invading his privacy when I realized he had asked to extend his stay. His door always had the Do Not Disturb sign on it, and I had just assumed he forgot to remove it before leaving, as many guests do. Story 44. Homeless man came into some money somehow. We never quite figured out how, but either way he stayed in the same room for about 2 months. Eventually we convinced him that he needed to go elsewhere as we had a big conference, or something like that, that was going to fill the whole hotel. I was a bellman and the hotel had a courtesy shuttle for the guests. I was instructed to give him a ride to the new hotel he would be staying at. I helped him get the remaining stuff from his room, and the moment I entered, I knew the room would be out of service for a while. There was trash everywhere, the bathtub was used as a waste bin, there were dirty stained towels pouring out of the closet, and he had stripped the bed to put his sleeping bag on the mattress. The worst part was the smell. Despite the fact that he had been staying there for at least 2 months by this point, I am 99% sure he never once used the shower. It was the strangest, most disgusting thing I had ever seen. The room was out for almost 2 weeks while it went through a deep clean, but it still had that smell for the rest of the 1.5 years that I worked there.